Next up is Don Robison and Carrie Leach from the Office of the Indiana State Chemist. Don is the seat administrator, and as I've told you, that office has walked closely with us and have been so supportive and have worked very hard on this. And once this came off Schedule 1 in December, Don became the target. I've never seen anyone have to tackle such an immense amount of emails, which he may address here, and phone calls, and he always takes time for this issue. Back in the corner, we have a longtime member of Team Hemp, if you will, and that's Scott McKay. And a long time ago, Scott coined a phrase, "Hempin' ain't easy." And now that's actually national. We should have trademarked it a long time ago. But because of Don's last 6 months, and because he's here today, you get a Hempin' Ain't Easy shirt, because there is no one that deserves it better than you.
Hi, my name is Carrie Leach. I am not on the agenda. I was sort of a last-minute addition, so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I am going to talk about, and with the Office of Indiana State Chemist, I am the Quality Assurance Director. I'm going to kind of talk about the laboratory perspective at our office and what we've done in 2019 and some of the stuff that we've been working on in the laboratory. So I feel like we're kind of in an exciting time right now where we've got all these rules and laws and regulation that are all kind of converging, and then we have the data and the science, and we're trying to find that sweet spot between all of them. And I feel like the grower is going to be the driver of that sweet spot. And it's also a great time, as Dr. Waltz mentioned, if you are a data nerd, now is the best time to be nerding out on all sorts of data. And you can slice it so many different ways, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So the hemp laboratory, and we touched on the USDA, the Farm Bill, and all of that stuff, but one of the things that is kind of up for consideration in the USDA final interim rules is the fact that hemp laboratories should possibly be ISO 17025 2017 accredited. And for any of those who are familiar with that, ISO has a set of standards that laboratories can follow. 17025 is the laboratory competency standard. And ISO has an accrediting body, so laboratories that accredit themselves to these standards will have to follow the standards and build their quality systems so that they're following the standards, and then the accrediting body comes out and accredits that laboratory and gives them a certificate and says, you're good to go. One of the things that they do is they give you a scope, and you put one of or more of your methods on the scope. So hopefully the 17025 accreditation means you would have your laboratory methods for hemp on your scope in that term. We are not accredited. We have not had an accrediting body come out and do their audit of us, but we are equivalent. We test our hemp samples for THC potency only. That is what's under our regulatory authority. So we are trying to find percent THC of the samples that come in from the growers. What we do, and this is 2019. I want to make sure to point out 2019 because obviously 2020 might see some changes. Right now, what we do, Purdue is kind enough to let us borrow some dryers. The samples come in, we put them in an 85-degree Fahrenheit dryer and to dry them until they're brittle, and that usually takes about 10 to 14 days. Once those samples come into the laboratory, they're run by gas chromatography first. And then if we find what the threshold that we had been going by for this year, this 2019 season, is the 0.39%. If it's below 0.4%, if it's at 0.39, it's considered a passing result. Once it got above 0.39%, it failed. So if we have something greater than 0.39 by GC, then we would then run the sample on either HPLC or UPLC for confirmation. And you'll hear a lot, and we have heard a lot about total THC, and that's where the total THC comes in. Once that sample is run by an LC, either HPLC or UPLC, it separates the peaks, and you can see the THCA, which is the acid form, the precursor form, and the THC. in order to have an idea of what the THC is in that plant, we combine the results for total THC. And I like to borrow an analogy from Dr. Waltz that he has given in the past that I love. When you talk about the total THC, if you have a cup of water and you have a cup of ice and somebody asks you how much water do you have, what is your answer going to be? You have the cup of liquid water and you have the cup of potential liquid water. Do you have 2 cups of water? And that's kind of how the total THC works. We combine them. So then if we get sample results greater than 0.39% on the confirmation, the LC confirmation, it's considered a failed result. We are a DEA registered laboratory for Schedule I controlled substances. We went through that process in July of this year, and from an analytical standpoint and documentation standpoint, QA standpoint, it makes sense for us because a lot of people say, well, it's off the Schedule I, why do we need to be a DEA Schedule I laboratory? But obviously this year proved that we had quite a few samples that were Schedule I controlled substances, and we had to document them as such and be accountable for them. So going through the process of the DEA registration wasn't a difficult process, and it's more about the documentation and the inventory that you keep of those controlled substances at that point. We do say, though, that controlled substances is anything above the 0.3%, even though they fail at the 0.39%. They're Schedule I controlled substances once they're above 0.3%. So we kind of have these 2 systems going on. And as part of that, we keep them in a double-locked storage. Only certain personnel can enter our laboratory through a swipe card, and then the samples are kept in a combination locked freezer. We have a safe if we need to store them at ambient conditions. And that is just for the plant material. The testing samples that are in methanol, those are considered consumed during testing, and we don't need to account for those in terms of the Schedule I controlled substances. We can dispose of those as a normal sample, but we do need to account for the dried plant material. We have not yet disposed of any of our samples. I know there's a lot of talk about in the field what's going to happen with the reverse distributors. On campus, we're a little bit lucky. We have a system in place where we can get rid of our samples a little easier because there are other facilities on campus, obviously, that are controlled substance laboratories. So we have a centralized location that we can work through for that. Otherwise, I guess it would be a reverse distributor with the state police laboratory. They hold a DEA registration as well. So one of the things that obviously is a lot of talk, we're talking a lot about is the USDA rules, but USDA has also put out a guidance for hemp testing that kind of surfaced here lately. And it's the testing guidelines for identifying Delta-9 THC concentration in hemp. It's currently being discussed with the Association of Analytical Chemists. There's a cannabinoids work group that is going through this method and trying to parse it all out and figure out what it means for testing laboratories. So when I talked about what we did in 2019, we'll be seeing some changes in 2020 based on whether the adoption of the ideas of these methods. In it, they do say that GC and LC are acceptable methods of detection, but they also say they must consider the potential conversion of Delta-9 to THCA to THC, and the test result reflect the total available THC derived from the sum of the THCA and the THCA. So they're really driving home that total THC if you're doing your LC analysis. And the concentration level shall be reported on a dry weight basis. We do have a moisture analyzer. We do take the moisture of the samples before we test them to make sure they're under 15%. But as you saw from my previous slide, we dry them until they're brittle, and then below 15% moisture is how we determine our THC levels. So determining on a dry weight basis is probably going to take a little more calculation and something we're going to have to figure out in 2020. And whether it alters the results of our 2019 to our 2020, hopefully we'll be comparing apples to apples in 2020. We'll just have to see next year when we pull the data together. Laboratories approved for THC testing must also be registered with DEA to handle controlled substances, and that is also in the USDA guidance for hemp testing that came out. I wanted to talk a little bit about measurement of uncertainty. I know that's been discussed lately. I think probably in terms of what is it and what do we do. This is the equation that the guideline recommends for the measurement of uncertainty. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I just kind of wanted to present it to you guys so you can see what laboratories are up against for determining what their measurement of uncertainty for determining THC potency testing. And it's not something that's going to be easy, and we're hoping to pull a lot of our data together that we already have. We've already done our method validation on our GC. We've done our method validation on our LC. I'm hoping to go back and pull a lot of that data together from that method of validation and try to figure out how much of that we can use for our measurement of uncertainty moving ahead into 2020. And feel free to interrupt me with questions at any time. And I did also want to mention that Dr. Bob mentioned earlier that we're looking for the opportunities for collaborative hemp laboratories. We're trying to see who's out there in terms of doing analytical testing and who's doing it the same way, and how can we sort of standardize this to make it even and fair for the growers. So we're hoping that qualifying laboratories will want to become collaborative hemp laboratories with us. Some of the stipulations that we're putting down is they would have to be able to use the OISC methods and follow similar drying methods and retention protocols, and also must be a DEA registered Schedule I controlled substance laboratory. If anybody's interested, there's a questionnaire that you can fill out. It's about a 5-page questionnaire that gets to how your quality systems are set up, how you handle things, what your laboratory looks like, and your method detections, with a possible on-site audit follow-up. And then, of course, we'll put approved laboratories on our website so that growers out there can see who to send samples to. So mine was pretty short, hopefully, because we're trying to get you to lunch. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah?
Quick question. Has the lab looked at any of the kind of portable, inexpensive THC analyzers from companies like MyDX to potentially certify or make available in the field so that testing can be done throughout the growth cycle?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we are interested in looking at. He asked if our laboratory has looked into any of those portable testing for in-field THC detection. We have not looked into the validity and how they compare with our results yet. That is definitely something that we're interested in. It looks like, the marketing, the promises that they make are very comparable to running by an LC test and doing the total THC. So we'd be interested in knowing how those results compare with all results, but we have not done any studies. We are just trying to keep up with the samples that we have right now. Any other questions?
Thank you. When you're doing total THC, are they taking into account the decarboxylation factor for the THCA, or are they just adding it 1-to-1?
No, we're doing an equation with the decarboxylation factor, yeah.
So I saw that we're doing, taking them wet, they take them back, and then they're dried there and then tested. I guess because drying also impacts how much CBD, how much THC. Flash freezing, preserving all the terpenes is completely different than the humidity rate and the time that it takes to dry. Is that any way accounted for, or do we just have to presume everything is going to be tested this way? And can we dry it the way that we dry it and give it as a sample? I guess that's the question.
So that I understand your question, are you asking if we're looking into some sort of freeze drying process, or is it more to the drying?
It's more, so when it's tested, the drying process has a huge impact
Sure.
on cannabinoids and the CBD content and what degrades and what doesn't degrade. So over a 14-day period, using one particular drying method will completely change what that looks like if it's flash frozen within 30 minutes of harvest.
Mm-hmm.
Two very, very big things of terpenes and cannabinoids and everything else. I just didn't know that if we have that option to, if we do flash freeze or that type of method, to dry in our method to say, hey, through the state, or is that better to do as a non-mandatory type test as a comparative? Does that make sense?
Right, yeah, so right now we have not really broached even on those conversations about the potential of having freeze-dried sample coming in, but that is and we'd have to, all of our method validations right now has been based on the fact that we dried one particular way, so we would need to do some work in the laboratory to see how we can get similar results or expected results. But those are conversations, if that's something that is going to be what growers do, something that is accepted practice, we would certainly need to take that into consideration.
I have a quick question. On the retest from the gas chromatography versus the high pressure chromatography, did you guys drop to see any differences between those two different tests in terms of the results?
Yeah, I wish I had some of that data to present to you guys, but there wasn't a lot in terms of, we were always, what we were worried about is what happens when we if we continually fail by GC and then we pass by LC, but we haven't seen a lot of differences in that respect. If it fails by GC, it's gonna fail by LC pretty much. And we don't see, large disparities of numbers. It pretty much looks as it should look, what we expected. All right, thank you.
Okay, so let me be the very first to wish you a good afternoon. When Jamie asked me what to name the presentation, I thought, there's no better name than to use the name of your conference, because hemp seed and genetics are at the crossroads. Being able to legally be bred using legal methods that have been used for generations, but now using new technology in breeding as well. Just to give you an example, if Beck's Hybrids down here, just probably 30 miles away, wants to create a new corn hybrid, it takes 7 years. So when I get somebody that tells me, oh yeah, I bred this year, I don't put a lot of faith in that. Not that they didn't do that. I have full faith in that. But is it stable? Is it actually a new variety? I put no faith in 1 year. None. We've got all this research history. We've got all this billions and billions of dollars in the seed corn industry, and it still takes 7 years. Let that sink in a little bit as I'm talking about the seed here. I think I got the headline wrong here. I think I got it backwards, but we have run into fraudulent COAs on seed. This came from a crop that was good, was tested and below 0.3. We've run into fraudulent COAs. Some of those have gone across multiple states. Same COA, just change the variety name and roll it across different states. We've run into fraudulent seed test results. This one, I know, has made it into 12 different states. Because a friend of mine is the one that did the original test in Colorado and signed off on it, and he's only done that variety one time. And there's this little thing on there, lab control number. So he can go back to the lab control number and find out what the test actually was. So I say that just to say that, in a lot of ways, we're at the wild, wild west part of this seed industry. And in a lot of ways, we're going to do what we can to get beyond that as quickly as we can. What seed laws and regulations govern seed? You guys don't care about that. Just know that there are seed laws that govern hemp, both federally and state. There are laws, and then there are administrative rules, the regulations that come out kind of tell us how to enforce the law. Is hemp seed governed by the same rules? Oh, that was in English, so hopefully everybody could read that. So what does the seed law and rules say? Your hemp seed must be tested. Must. Not shall, not could be, must be tested. Your seed must be labeled properly. And we'll go over that a little bit in a minute. Seed cannot be sold in Indiana without a seed permit. And you get that seed permit through our office. A stop sale can be put on any seed that's not labeled, not tested, and sold without a seed permit. Think back through your seed purchasing of the last year And now you know why I say that we got the Wild Wild West. We got people getting seed in trash bags. This trash bag is this variety, this trash bag is another variety. We've got seed picked up from a facility. A lot of farmers picked up seed from a facility where a magic marker was written on the bag, about every fifth or sixth bag, said hemp. Okay, that doesn't quite meet the law. You also have to keep detailed records of all seed sales for 2 years. Detailed as in what variety, what lot number, what seed kind, being hemp, who it was sold to, for what price, and when it was delivered. You have to keep very detailed records. Those records come into play if there's a problem with the seed and someone wants to go through the process of complaining about it. We have to be able to go in and find those records. Okay, so I originally called this my top 10, but I think there's 12 or 13. So unlike the Big 10, I will actually be accurate here. Germination percentage, percent pure seed, percent inert, percent other crop, percent weed seed, noxious weeds claim, variety name, must be named. You can't have variety not stated, as you can in some other kinds of seed. Labeler information, including a full address. Germination test date. That's the date the seed was tested because it's good for 12 months after that test date. Origin, where it was grown. Lot number and arbitration statement. So we'll go into all of those here briefly. Here's an example of an acceptable level or label. As you can see, there are about 14 different things that have to be on that label. And that's what your seed label should have looked like when you bought your seed last year. By a show of hands, how many got a seed label that looked something like that? Exactly what we thought. So, I'm a member of the board of the American Association of Seed Control Officials. So we're the seed police. The biggest thing we can do is put a stop sale on seed. We're telling you now, in 2020, if we see seed that is not labeled properly, across the country, seed control officials will be putting a stop sale on that seed until it is labeled correctly. 2019 was that's where we're learning about all the issues. 2020, we now know about the issues. How many are on our hemp email list? Okay, a lot of you are not. If you're not, get with Jamie. She'll give you our address, and you can get at it. We send out an email probably every 3 weeks, every month, with industry information on hemp. One of the things we sent out was a 6-page document on how to get your seed tested, how to label it. It's not a difficult process, you just have to go through those steps. Okay, germination rate percentage. We are an AOSA lab, Association of Official Seed Analysts. We recognize other AOSA labs' results. So tests are done in special equipment. This is not something you can do in your oven. You can do it, but it's not acceptable as your official results. Temperatures range from 20 degrees to 30 degrees on a set time, replicating day length and day-night temperature swings. Germinated seed is counted twice. So, this is the process for testing hemp seed. It would be different if we're talking about corn, be different if we're talking about Kentucky bluegrass. But this is what it is for hemp. Final test date is the month and year you put all the seed on it, germination. Okay, so how many of you heard of seed, hemp seed, selling for $1 a seed? Okay, pretty good number. Some higher than that. So does that keep us from pulling a representative sample and testing it because it's expensive? Wouldn't it be more valuable to you to know what you're getting on $1 a pound seed or $1 a seed than it would be on $8 a pound seed? So if you're selling seed and you're selling it for $1 a pound or a seed, We need a minimum of 800 seeds to do this test. Now, the good news is we only charge $10. The bad news is you just put $800 worth of seed in our lab. But it's a requirement. Okay, here's the germination test results over the last 4 or 5 years. In 2019, we did 45 germination tests on hemp. Some of that was old seed. So we kept seed back from year to year. The idea of that is, if you don't sell your hemp seed one year, can you plant it the next year? Is it any good? So here's the results. Average germination rate was 52%. That includes some old seed. Some of it was part of that 3 or 4 year study. The first year seed averaged around 70 to 75% germination. How many of you get told, hey, this is really good hemp seed, it averages 70% germination? You're being told it averages 90%. Another reason why we need all this seed tested. I don't think those people are purposefully lying to you. I think they just don't know. We tested in a perfect environment, 70, 75%. When in doubt, ask for the seed lab report. So if you're buying seed and it looks a little hinky to you, that's a technical term, by the way, hinky. If you're buying seed and it looks a little hinky to you, ask them for the seed lab report that they got back from the seed lab that shows all of the purity and noxious weeds and the germination rate. If they can't provide that, tell them you'll buy their seed when they can provide that. On hemp, it only takes about 7 to 10 days to provide that. Well worth waiting. Okay, percent pure seed. This picture is one designed to just show you how much time it can take. We did a mix. I think it had 14 to 16 components in it. And if you can imagine a seed analyst at their desk with a set of forceps separating out each different kind of seed. Also separating out the weed seeds by kind, the inert matter, and then we weigh all of that. That gives us a percent pure seed, a percent inert matter, a percent of weed seeds, and percent of other crop. That's all the information that you should be getting on a seed lab report. Noxious weed test. This is a separate test. Okay, in a noxious weed test, all we're looking for is Indiana noxious weeds in the test. Have we found noxious weeds in hemp? Yes, we have. We have. So when you're testing for this, that's probably not something you want to put on your farm. But there are 2 different kinds of noxious weeds. There's prohibited, which means you can't plant that in Indiana unless you grew it and you're planting it yourself. You can't sell it to anybody in Indiana. You may be able to sell it to somebody in another state who has a different list of noxious weed seeds. So it's not like the crop is a total loss. Every state has a little bit different list of noxious weed seeds. So how many of you have seen Canada thistle in your field? Okay, noxious weed seed. Can't sell it. But if it's in your field and you harvest that field for seed, that field the grain has to be cleaned before it can be sold. So a lot of guys are not in that process yet of going through and finding cleaners. There aren't that many for-hire cleaners around in the state, but there are a few, and we don't recommend one over another, but we can give you a list and say, here's a bunch of cleaners, pick the one that you feel most comfortable with. Label or information section. So you need to have your company name and full address on the label. Why would you do that? Somebody's got to know who to go back to if there's a problem, right? Lot number. Here's another one. If I've got 2 fields of X59, they're not close to each other, I've got 2 lot numbers. You can call it a blend and put them together and have 1 lot number. But if I've got two separate fields, most people in the seed industry consider a field to be a lot number. Sometimes it's more than that, but you can put them together and have one lot number. But if I was you, I would try to do smaller lot numbers to start with until you really know what you're growing. It's more detailed that way. If there's a problem with the seed, you know which field it came from, right? You know where the weeds came from. If you're buying from somebody, make sure you see a lot number on there. That seed lab report that was dummied had the same lot number in 12 states, and it was different varieties. Now that's possible because you can put lot number 1. That can be your lot number. We don't dictate what your lot number is, but it's typically, if you want a decent way to start doing that, and you're growing seed or selling seed, lot number, the year it was grown would be a really good way to start that lot number, 2019 dash, you could put what field it's in. If there's a field number, you could put that field number. Because you have to be able to go back and check that seed, see where it came from. That's what the lot number's for. Coating material. We're not at this point yet in hemp, but in a lot of seed, how many of you have been to a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a Walmart and you see Scott's? And it's 50% coated lawn seed. That's to keep the seed moist. Most of that coating is a clay or a polymer to keep the seed moist. We're not there yet in hemp, but I wanted to throw it in because it is part of the seed law. Kind and variety. Okay, so this gets confusing to a lot of people. Hemp is the kind. Hemp is the seed kind, just like hybrid field corn is a seed kind, or soybean is a field kind. Variety is what variety that you planted. You cannot change variety names. It's against the law. We ran into a lot of this year. The chart that Dr. Bob showed you, I don't know if you could read, I'm not going to rat them out, but I don't know if you could read the variety that was all the way to the right. Could any of you up close read that variety name? That variety name was actually an Oregon variety that went to Colorado and failed. The name was changed and then sold to Indiana. It failed in 2 states before it came here. But it's under now 3 different names. That's why you can't change variety names. If you do one year of breeding, as I said before, not so sure that's a new variety. Probably good to go talk to really accomplished seed breeders and find out how to do that. Plus, you have to have permission from the people that own the original variety if you're going to breed with their stock. Okay, so the variety name is assigned by the original breeder and cannot be changed. We have evidence of several varieties being changed in 2019. I would say of the 70-some varieties we tested this year, at least 20 of them are not a real variety. Let that sink in. You're buying seed. You would never, if you're a row crop farmer, you would never accept that from a hybrid seed corn or a soybean or wheat supplier. You want to know what you're planting. Here, it's even more important because, like the variety that was all the way to the right, you're sitting there with a variety that some of that tested as much as 4.5% THC. Extremely important to know who you're buying from. We have now over 40 Indiana seed permits of people selling hemp seed. We don't recommend one or the other. That's your job to figure that out. Very important. Okay, not even going to go into this because it's close to lunch, but I'll just say this. When microorganisms can be added to the seed, which right now they can't, when they can be added to the seed, there's an expiration date on those. So you can only claim the microorganism claim until that expiration date goes away. Then you either have to retreat the seed or not claim that microorganism, that inoculant. Origin, where the seed was grown. That variety all the way to the right, grown in Colorado, called something from Oregon, grown in Indiana. You know, where was it grown? Because we can go back as a ASCO member, seed control official, I can call my counterpart in other states and find out if they really did grow that seed there. All of this comes up to this point, okay? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I know from our survey there are several people that were dissatisfied with some of the varieties they bought. They weren't pleased. They went hot. They were told they wouldn't go hot. You know, didn't grow, low germination rate, whatever. Indiana is an arbitration state. Indiana law requires that two parties who can't agree on seed quality issues and cannot settle the dispute themselves go to a state-appointed arbiter. That's pretty common among most states. Most of the time, it never gets to that point. In fact, I don't remember the last time we ever had an arbitration statement or a claim in Indiana. But the arbitration statement, which you can find on our website, needs to go on the seed when you sell it. Go on the back of the tag, you can go on separate tag, it needs to go on there so that everybody's aware of how to complain, how to possibly get money back, how to go through those stages. Okay, you can get all this information from our website, walks you through the labeling process. We have, like I say, a 6-page document, and you can just do a quick search. You can do a Google search for OISC, hemp, seed, testing, and it will take you to that page and that document. Tells you how to test and how to label hemp seed. Other hemp seed tests, percent feminized. We don't do that test. That'd be a good test to have, right? Heard a couple of complaints about that this year. Thought it was 95% feminized and people are pulling males off of it left and right. Be a good test to do. We believe that there will be another lab in Indiana that will do that test, but some of the hemp lab tests probably do that test. Certified seed, we talked about this a little bit. It's not going to be, don't believe it's going to be part of the Indiana rules, but I want to be very clear. This statement, certified seed, has nothing to do with CBD or THC content. Nothing. Zero, nilch, nada, nothing. It has to do with whether that seed came from a parentage of seed that was called registered seed, breeder seed, or foundation seed stock. If you buy certified seed from somebody and grow it to sell it as seed, that's not certified seed. You have to start with registered, breeder, or foundation seed stock. That's why there are so few certified seed varieties in hemp right now. I think Colorado has 10, and they've been at this for several years. Oregon has 2 or 3, I think. Don't hold me to that, but I know Colorado had 10. They were working on another one. But you have to start with a more strict level of testing and then work your way down. Special land requirements, planting eligible stock, field inspections, proper seed labeling, and meeting standards based on complete lab analysis all go into certified seed. There's only one agency in Indiana that can help you with certified seed. That's Indiana Crop Improvement Association. If you're not growing this seed using all of that, it cannot be called certified seed. Hemp seed sellers must keep detailed records. We talked about that. Hemp seed and genetics, vast majority of hemp seed was not tested or labeled 2019 as evidenced. When I asked how many saw a seed label, I had the only hand up, and I was lying. I didn't see a seed label. I looked for it, I really did. Documented hemp seed sellers changing variety names, we talked about that. Variety name stays with the variety for life. I want to drive that point home. You can't just change a variety name. It is what it is. Worldwide, it is what it is. Here's a bunch of websites this presentation, I believe, is going to be available to you. So as our website, we put out a lot of information on Twitter. I tweeted this morning that we were here talking about all these different areas. If you have a Twitter account, that's the most common way that we put out information, but those are short bursts. So we do make sure you get with Jamie and get how to get on our Hemp email listserv, because that's the most detailed information. Indiana State Department of Agriculture is on there. AFCO, Bob talked about feed earlier. Seed certifying agencies will help you to know more detail how to get seed tested. And Indiana Crop Improvement, which is the seed certifying agency in Indiana. Are there any questions? Yeah, when's lunch? Yes, Marty.
I may have missed the first part of your slide where you talked about needing 800 seeds.
Yes.
To a jury. Can you revisit that?
Yes. Okay, so if all you want is a germination test, we need 800 seeds. And here's the reason why. We test using 400 seeds the first time. If that test does not look right for any reason, maybe in the germinator it got too dry, because this is highly specialized, highly sensitive equipment. These are $20,000 units. It's not your refrigerator, not your stove, okay? They hold temperatures very closely to where we put them. In fact, if something goes out of temperature by a degree, I get an alert on my phone. Highly sensitive equipment. If something goes wrong, say the power goes out, we need another 400 seeds of the same lot number that was sampled the same way. Now, if we're testing against a label, so you actually did label it, and we pull that sample as a regulatory sample, if we test it the first time and it does not meet with intolerances of your label, then the second time we'll run it again. We give you the benefit of the doubt once, then we'll retest it with the other 400 seeds. We actually need to do purity, germination, all that. We need more seed than that. And that's on our website under the seed service information form. It tells you how much seed to send to get a complete test. Again, it's pretty expensive. It's $10. Nothing in this industry is $10. Right? Nothing is $10. But our test is. Good question, Marty. Anybody else? Yes.
Can you elaborate more on the feminization test and just exactly, are there certified feminized seed testers? How do you know that it's real and not real?
Okay, so the seed control or the seed certifying agencies, most of them are DNA test labs as well. And they can do a test. They've told me that they can do a test, which I know nothing about, other than they've told me they can do it. So that's the reason I had this Indiana Crop Improvement Association on there. Illinois Crop Improvement is another one that started doing testing with hemp. But you can do a test there and find out what percentage is feminized seed. And they only need like 100 seeds to do that test. The test itself doesn't take very long. It's a matter of where you get in the line. What point in the line you are. Anybody else? Yes.
Is there a DNA test for clones?
There probably is. That's out of my bailiwick because I don't test clones in our lab. But you could probably test to make sure one plant is the same as another plant. It would be a DNA PCR test. It would be within reason. I'm sure it wouldn't tell you exact, but it would be within reason. Yes?
You said there's not a lab in Indiana that has a feminization rate?
The lab in Indiana that is getting geared up for that is Indiana Crop Improvement.
Okay, are you familiar with phylos?
Who?
Phylos?
I've heard of that, yes.
That's like Colorado.
Yes,
So is the process at this point, just using out of state, that would work for Indiana?
yes. Yes, that's why we're working. Carrie was up here before and talked about the questionnaire of other labs. That's why we're working to try to get a list of labs, because we want to make sure that everybody's following the same method when they do the testing.
Final systems we use in Colorado, they only need 88 cuts off of plants. That's all you need. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a much smaller,
Verification there.
much smaller than the seed test is.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's a lab, Carrie Phylos is a lab we will send the information to and see if they want to participate in a group to make sure we're all testing the same methods. Yes, sir.
Anybody that's doing good seed should already be using somebody like Phylos and doing that testing before they're bringing that to market. So they should, the seed providers should already have that data of which lab they're using to prove feminization. It shouldn't be just, yeah, it's feminized, trust me. It should be
Right.
third-party, independent certified labs like Phylos. That should be already in the repertoire if they're gonna even try to sell it on the market in any state.
You're dead on correct, but that's not happening.
Or it's not being requested to see that data
Yes.
from the purchaser.
You know, we've got an issue in row crop agriculture with cereal rye. Okay, it's a cover crop used extensively, probably the number one seeded cover crop in Indiana. And with that cover crop, we find a lot of weeds and very low germination rates on a consistent basis. And what we tell everybody in that part of the industry is get the seed lab report. And if you get the seed lab report and there's anything questionable about it, call the seed lab and make sure it's not been dummied. When we send out a seed lab report, it goes out on a watermarked paper. That watermark shows up when you copy it. So that at least one level more of protection. But if you have questions, don't feel bad about calling the lab and double checking it. We would welcome those calls. Anybody else? Yes.
Is there a database or a website that if we're purchasing seed that we can kind of do our own due diligence to check those names or trace those
No.
strains?
No. You know, over the next 2-3 years, I think this issue will gladly mostly go away. The people, as we educate people on it has to be labeled, has to be tested, you know, those type of things, I think a lot of this issue will go away as the issue has largely gone away in agriculture as a whole. People really don't question when they buy a hybrid seed corn bag whether that's actually the hybrid that's in the bag. That was something that went away 80 years ago. Yes.
I can say that Purdue Extension with Marguerite, we are talking about trying to do some version of that. Once again, we have to jump to liability, right? So we put this recommendation out there based upon our experience this year, and so we're trying to figure out if there's a way that we can do that informally, if you will, and just say, you know, this is at least the experience people had. So you have to make your own choice, but try to provide some information. But
Right.
there's a fine line there.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I mean, I was just thinking with everybody, you know, like you said, renaming
Right.
all these strains, you know, if there was a way for us to trace that back and say, you know, this was the original.
I'll give you one more example. There's a variety out there that was reasonably well used in Indiana, and I know for a fact that the owner of that variety, who has not licensed anybody to sell his seed, did not sell one seed in Indiana. So keep calling until you get to the original source.
One thing to reinforce that with Jamie, anytime that you're receiving data from someone like a COA or like, you know, feminization rates, anything like, germination rates, those are all gonna have sample ID numbers on them.
Yep.
Call that lab and ask what that sample ID represents.
Yes.
Unfortunately, this is an unregulated market right now, and people are stealing other people's test data and passing it off as their own.
Yep.
So that's a great way to call the lab and say, what is the XYZ123 sample? Oh, that's a sample of a feminized certified seed that should have this, you know, data rate. And then
Yep.
they should tell you exactly what you're looking at, and then you know that that's true because it's information. So
Right.
some
And if it comes from a lab, I was told this morning, and I've forgotten which of the labs right now, but I was told this morning that another lab uses a watermark that would be pretty obvious if it was dummied, like we do. So if it comes from a lab that has a watermark, it's more likely that it's what it really says. Yes, sir.
As obviously 19's gone, but I had 16 different cherry wines. So obviously there was renaming in that mix. They were all really different.
That particular variety has a lot of renaming.
But it's because it was recommended, right?
Right.
So the question is how do we now, if we find some really good testing genetics from those 16, which we didn't put in
Right.
here, you would, how do you also preserve that name to make sure that it was proper? We don't want to be in violation of us
Right.
renaming something because we have no idea what it was originally.
One of the things that we've talked about with Indiana Crop Improvement is to do a DNA analysis of different varieties. They're capable of that. They're not opposed to doing that, and take every seed lot that's brought into Indiana and do a DNA analysis. So then you can compare, is this actually what it said coming from the other guy?
Until then, what's our, my big thing is, we have them, but we haven't sold anything, because I can't back
Right.
it up. I have no idea, I can't tell somebody this is
Right.
truly.
Well, I'll tell you that typically there's a difference between seed companies, that's what they do, and people just reselling seed. And I would say that in agriculture as well. Seed companies, they're used to getting their stuff tested, they're used to the labeling laws, they're used to all of that. They're more likely to have gone through all the processes. We're not recommending anybody one over the other, but seed companies are more likely to have that information.
I just didn't Jeff before.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's kind of the wild, wild west right now. But I will take umbrage with one thing you said. It is regulated. It is a regulated industry. And we're trying to bring everybody up to speed. One of the reasons we wanted to speak here on seed laws, one of the reasons we send out information on a regular basis, the people that are labeled or have seed permits in Indiana, they get that document. I think I've sent it to them twice this year already.
I think if I can chime in, one of the things, and I'm speaking for myself, actually, let's do this. How many in the room grew 2019 or you're going to grow in 2020? Show of hands. Now, everybody, keep your hand up. Now, if you've never grown a row crop, and I'm not talking about anything in your garden, if you haven't grown a row crop before, lower your hand. So all of us are doing this for the first time. You guys let your hand down. That's what we've seen this year is that, we've got farmers and we've got growers. And that's okay, but as growers, as new people to this, it's our job, and I had to learn the hard way too, but it's our job to gain this education and to reach out and figure out how to bridge this gap. As Midwest Hemp Council, Indiana Farmers Union, INHIA, we try to help with that. But if you're going to grow, you have to realize this is a crop now. And so it's on us to make sure that this is correct. It's doing our research. And I can't tell you how many farmers I stood in their field. They were literally handed something to plant, or growers, they were handed something to plant, they didn't know anything about it, and they grew it. And then they want to point fingers perhaps, or they're concerned. So it's on all of us. You guys have heard me say over and over, I have farmers telling me that they don't open Don's emails. If you don't participate, if you don't engage, you're not only hurting yourself, but you're hurting the industry. So
by the way,
it takes all of us.
that doesn't mean they're unregulated. If you don't open the email, that doesn't count. I open all of your emails. Jamie commented on that earlier. We've had over 13,000 emails since the Farm Bill. And we've opened every one of them.
Are there any label requirements for seedlings or clones?
Our law does not cover seedlings or clones. Yes.
Do you need a label if you're not selling your seed to someone them to grow it, then you paid them for what they've grown, but you didn't sell them actually the seed.
Yes, yes. There's still distribution of the seed. The law doesn't say sell, it says distribution. Or it might say both, but yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Enjoy your lunch.